Hello my friends, this is Christian from Germany. In my new video I'm gonna show you some very interesting and tricky lines in the Italian classical variation. This starts with pawn to e4, pawn to e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4 and bishop to c5. And our classical variation starts with pawn to c3, preparing for the crush in the center with pawn to d4. And that's we're gonna wanna play in this line. Before we start with all these variations, I have to say that this Italian classical variation is very useful to learn some tactical resources and tricks, and I think it is a really strong opening if you know these variations with white. So, and black can be crushed very, very quickly. At the top level, this is not really often played because if black knows very exactly how to face them, I think he can have a comfortable game. But if he doesn't know exactly what he's doing, I think white is always better. And now you can see it. At first we look at the sideline with pawn to d6. And then we just play d4. And here at first we look at e takes on d4, c takes on d4, bishop check. And now, very important, if you're playing the d6 line without a knight on f6, then it is important not to play knight to c3 because this knight is pinned. In this case, you should play the by far best move here, and this is king to f1. And now you can see the threats. If you know the threats, you can remember this very easily. The threat is to play queen to b3, attacking this bishop indirectly, and in the next move we push pawn to d5. And then this knight has to go away and the bishop is hanging. And also if king to b3, the second threat is that this diagonal on the f7 pawn will be very, very weak. So this is really, really funny to play now for white. And after king to f1, I would say this is +1 for white. So you can see how dynamic this position is. Black can be crushed very, very quickly if he makes one wrong move. And here I show you some logical moves for black and how they can be crushed quickly. We start with the move bishop to g4, which seems to be a very good move. But then our tricky business starts with, yes, queen to b3. The game continues with bishop captures on f3, but then comes this shocking move with bishop captures on f7. The king has to move to the f8 forcefully, then pawn captures. White is pawn captured because we want to take this bishop on b4, of course. And then we just play a few moves. Knight captures, attacking the queen. Then queen captures, knight c2, forking the rook and the queen, but no matter, queen to d2. Knight captures and bishop retreats. And if we look carefully at this position, this is completely winning for white because we're counting the pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Both players have 5 pieces, but the knight on a1 is definitely trapped. You can simply play pawn to b3 or play bishop to the b2, and you are a full piece up, and also black's king is misplaced. Let's have a look for another move, for example, knight to f6. But this move can be crushed immediately. So you can see how dangerous the king to f1 move is. After knight to f6, you just push pawn to d5. And after this knight has to remove, for example, on e7, you just can give the queen check on a4 and you are the whole piece up. Okay, I'm gonna show you the last logical choice for black, which is bishop to d7. And this can be crushed very quickly and very funny. And it starts with queen to b3. Now we have a double threat. The first threat is to take on f7 with check. This is completely winning. And the other threat is that you push pawn to d5. This knight has to go away and you just capture the bishop. So already in this position we can say that this is completely winning for white. And I'm gonna show you how to crush black. For example, he realizes that bishop can retreat, but then here comes the shock. bishop captures on f7, check. King has to go away. And then we play the next brilliant move. Bishop captures, knight on g8, rook captures, and now knight to g5, threatening checkmate on f7. So he has to do something. Queen to e8, for example. But then he's completely collapsing. After knight check, king goes to the e7 and the brilliant bishop g5 checkmate. What a cute checkmate. Let's go back to the fifth move of the game. Instead, e captures on d4. Bishop can also retreat to the b6, but this is always bad. I'm gonna show you. So you can play d captures on e5. And I give you an example. D captures on e5 is also very bad because you can capture the queen. King cannot capture because bishop takes on f7. So the better move is knight captures. But then you're always a pawn up after knight takes on e5, and white is better. Let's go back into move number 4. Let's say black plays the main move knight to f6. This is the most often played move in this position. Then we just play pawn to d4, striking for the center and gaining some space for tactical resources. After this, the only move for black is to capture on d4 with the pawn. For example, if he does not, retreating the bishop or like this, then you can always take this pawn. So you are at first a pawn up, and I'll make another move, knight to g4 for example, but then you can sacrifice the bishop, and after king takes, knight check, king goes to e8, and then you're getting black's knight, and you can see black's king has to stay in the center, and you will have a really comfortable and good game with white. So that's the reason why he has to take the pawn on d4 in move 5. Okay, after knight to f6, then I said we push pawn to d4. And then after pawn captures, here is one thing I will have to mention. And the thing is, if you analyze this with some computers, you can see that the move pawn to e5 is the main move which the computer prefers. But I don't really like this move. I want to show you why. For example, we play pawn to e5, but then we got this counter with d5. And I can just play the best moves for you, and you can see why black equalized the game immediately. Okay, I just play computer moves, bishop to b5, then knight jumps in and he's protected by the pawn on d5. Not really good, we take the pawn, check, and so on and so on. And if you look at this position, it's horrible. You're playing white and he can equalize very easy only by knowing this d5 move. So we don't like this position. We just want to play some better variations. After e captures on d4, we're gonna not push pawn to e5. No, we play a tricky move, and this is c captures on d4. And now I'm gonna show you how to go for some very crazy and funny attacks. The obvious choice for black is to give this check with this bishop on b4. And you have to remember, if there is a knight on f6, don't play king to f1. Now it is a terrible move. If the knight is on f6 here and not pawn on d6, it is important to play knight to c3. That's the thing you have to remember. And now here are many choices for black, how he can continue the game. At first we want to have a look for the most often played and the most logical move here. And this is knight captures on e4, winning a pawn for free. But I think he also is in the tricky camp if he takes the pawn on e4, because we're just gonna castle on the king's side. And now it makes a big difference if he takes this knight with the bishop or with this knight. At first we're gonna have a look for the move knight captures on c3, and after b takes, bishop takes, attacking the rook. Now here comes a very beautiful move, and this is queen to b3. And you can see the beauty of all these lines because it is so tricky. Let's say black's bishop is hungry and takes the rook on a1, but this is completely winning for white. The winning move is bishop captures on f7. And now king has to go to the f8. And you can bring your next attacker into the game, bishop to g5. queen is attacked. And only by the way, black's knight on c6 is not allowed to take this pawn because after queen check, and now black's queen is gone. So this knight cannot take this pawn, so knight goes to e7. But then here comes another attacker, say hello to the knight on e5. And now it's a matter of choice. There are only bad moves for black. Let's say he takes the pawn with the bishop, but then we just play bishop to g6 and we're threatening checkmate on f7. So the only way to stop this is to play pawn to d5. But this is no problem for us. We just play queen to f3 and nothing stops the checkmate or the losing position for black. Let's say black is not really hungry, doesn't take the rook on a1. Instead he will play a very directly move, and I think a better move, which is pawn to d5. But here I can show you this will always lead to very critical positions for black. At first you have to capture the bishop on c3, and after pawn captures you play a very important move, which is pawn to d5. And now the knight has to retreat to the e7, and the e7 will be the new target in this kind of game. I just play a few moves for you and you can see how the position is collapsing from black. Okay, we play bishop to b2, so the pawn on g7 is attacked, he has to do something. Best move is to play pawn to f6, and then you can see the pressure will be higher and higher. Next move, rook to e1, pressurizing and fixing this pin this knight. So another move, castle, then bishop to a3, pressure is still here, rook to e8, and then just capture this pawn, king goes here, and after queen to e2, we have 3 attackers here, and you are a piece up. And I can show you the next few moves if you want. You can play bishop to the g4, then we capture, bishop takes, pawn takes, of course. And after this few moves, you can see that you are a healthy piece up. Let's have a look at the next variation. After bishop takes the knight on c3. And here's the big question. Should we recapture the bishop on c3? Or can we make a more active move? The computer says capture back with the pawn with the b pawn. But I can say to you, here is a better move. The better move, I think, the more active move is to push this pawn on d5. And now your opponent has to think a while, because he can be crushed really quickly. I can show you a very cool game I found on the internet of this variation, and I hope I can inspire you with this. Okay, please lean back and enjoy. You can see that both pieces, the knight on c6 and the bishop on c3, are hanging. The game I'm going to show you will continue with bishop retreats to f6, which is already the best move. And now, really important, don't capture this knight on c6. At first we want to develop our pieces to create a strong attack. So the strongest move is rook to e1. Don't hurry too much. Then he cannot stop that you're getting your piece back, because you have a double attack of knight on e4 on knight on c6. So the best move and the move in the game is retreating knight to the e7. But then you just capture this knight on e4. And then we have castle on the king's side. And here is a very strong and really important move which was played in this game. And this is pushing pawn to d6. And after pawn takes, queen takes, you can see that the pawn structure of black is really bad. The pieces are really closed and he has not really good counter game. So I can show you how to manage this position. In this game he played knight to f5, attacking the queen. Queen retreats to the d5. And the next move, really logical, pawn to d6. Now this bishop is protecting the knight on f5. And here comes a very tricky move, which is knight to g5. And this is a really strong move and a really tricky move, yes. Okay, let's say we play the logical moves which were in the game. After bishop captures, I can say if queen takes, white is winning immediately. I give you a few seconds. Okay, you can find it by your own. Okay, I hope you saw this tactic here. After queen captures, you play the tricky move queen takes on f7, a queen sacrifice. After rook captures, you play this rook to e8 and you got a checkmate. Very cute checkmate and very funny and cool trick in this game. Of course, we're gonna have a look for the other move, which is castle on the king side. And here I'm gonna show you a very strong game, how you can play this, and I analyzed this very careful with the computer. The strongest move by far is to play bishop to g5. You're threatening e5 immediately, so he has to stop it with pawn to h6, asking the bishop. He has to take this knight, queen takes, and then castle on the king side. Then after pawn to d6, he wants to bring out bishop to the g4. That will be not good for us, so we have to do some quicker things. At first we can attack the queen. Queen has to move away. Then we can ask the bishop. Bishop has to go away. And then we can play the second donkey with pawn to h3. And this stops white's plan to place the bishop on the g4. And if you have done this two donkey ears and you have this space in the center, I would say white is better now. And I can show you how to use the space advantage. Okay, then he retreats the knight. These are always the best moves, I can say you that. And then you remove the knight to the f4. Bishop goes here because you can always gain tempo with b4. Then rook to e1, placing the next piece into the game. c6, the queen comes also into the game. Bishop retreats back. Pawn takes, queen takes, rook here, defending this knight. And now you have to move the queen to the h5 because the rook now is on e8. He's not protecting the f7. f7 will be the next target of us. So the obvious choice and the best move here, queen to e5. After bishop attacks the queen, you're threatening a check on f7. So he's not allowed to capture this knight on f4. So knight goes here, then knight captures, pawn captures, rook takes, then rook to e1, attacking the queen, you're gaining another tempo, and now bishop captures. And if you look at this position, you are very active with the white pieces, and I think white has the better position with a central pawn. At least I'm gonna show you the move pawn to d6. And here also this line is very tricky and not really good for black. We play now the tricky move pawn to d5. Because you can see if you play not bishop takes the knight on c3, he will infect the game. So I can show you that. So for example, knight goes to e5 is completely losing at this moment because after queen check and you are getting the full piece. So this is not possible. He cannot play knight to e5 and ignore this. Instead, he has to forcefully capture this knight. After pawn captures, knight to e5, and then knight captures and d takes. And here you can see the easy plan for white. And I can show you most important moves, how the game should continue for you. And at first we have to protect the pawn on e4, and the move is bishop to d3, and after a castle on the king's side and bishop to a3, rook has to go to the e8, and then we castle on the king's side too. And he has to play now the move b6 to develop his bishop correctly. And now we have a very easy plan. We just play pawn to c4, placing the rook behind this pawn and push pawn to c5. And we have a space advantage. We have much more comfortable position with white. And yes, I think the rest of the game you can manage by your own. Okay, that was all about the Italian classical variation. I would say to you, I hope it gives you some inspiration and you try it out. And if you have some questions for this, please subscribe in description, and I wish you much fun with this opening. Bye bye.